In Pokemon Stadium and Stadium 2, which were released on April 30th, 1999 and December 14th, 2000 respectively, players can battle Brock. Brock uses several Pokemon that he owned in the anime, such as Golbat in Stadium and Steelix and Fortress in Stadium 2. However, in the anime, Brock's Zubat didn't evolve into Golbat until September 21st, 2000, and his Pineco and Onix didn't evolve until August 1st, 2002 and May 18th, 2006, respectively. All three of these dates are after their respective Stadium game release dates, so maybe these games should have been packaged with a spoiler warning. The Fame Checker is a key item exclusive to Fire Red and Leaf Green that records various pieces of information about quote-unquote famous people like gym leaders. In one of Misty's entries, titled There's a Rumor, we are told that she worships Lorelei of the Elite Four, and while this is totally reasonable, the source is quite literally a tabloid. Speaking of the Fame Checker, there's also a rumor about Lieutenant Surge, which says that Lieutenant Surge is rumored to have been a pilot while home in America, which implies that America is canon in the Pokemon world. This may be a bit surprising if it weren't for the fact that Fire Red and Leaf Green also mention the continent of South America in the journals of the Pokemon Mansion. The series later retconned this in Black and White 2 when the announcer at the Pokemon World Tournament asks if Lieutenant Surge may be from Unova, which is, of course, the Pokemon World counterpart region of New York in America. In the original Generation 1 games, Erika's kimono and her sprite was crossed right over left, which culturally is reserved specifically for the deceased at funerals. This issue was corrected in the release of Yellow. Koga is the only gym leader from Gens 1 through 5 to not appear in Black and White 2. He was not invited to participate at the Pokemon World Tournament because Black and White 2 take place canonically after the events in Johto. This means that at the time, he was an Elite Four member, and the Elite Four did not have a tournament class at the Pokemon World Tournament. Janine appears as an NPC in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but when spoken to, her name isn't visible. The conversation you have with her is recorded in Koga's Fame Checker entries under the name Charine, so she is a named character you can interact with in the Gen 3 games, but her name is incorrect. And even stranger, this is only the case in the English and Italian versions. In all other languages, the correct name is used. Sabrina makes an appearance as a movie star in Black and White 2 at the Pokestar Studios, in the Doors of the Magical Land series, where she plays the role of the evil and magical queen Belelba. Despite being unlocked right after completing the Pokestar Studios tutorial, most players have never completed this set of movies, and so it's not very well known that Sabrina makes an appearance here. Koichi was the leader of the fighting-type gym in Saffron City that was overthrown by Sabrina prior to the events of the original Red, Green, and Blue and Fire Red and Leaf Green timelines. Sometime before the beginning of the events in Gold, Silver, and Crystal and Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Koichi moved away from Saffron City, eventually ending up in Lumiose City sometime prior to the events of X and Y. In Lumiose, he attempts to start a new fighting dojo, but is only able to get new students easily by falsely advertising it as a dancing studio. Blaine is the only gym leader to operate the same gym in two different locations across the series, one on Cinnabar Island prior to the eruption of the volcano, and one in the Seafoam Islands after he was displaced. At the conclusion of the Rainbow Rocket storyline in Ultra Sun and Moon, Giovanni says, "Now, what new world shall I unleash my evil schemes upon?" before teleporting away from the Aether Paradise. Several years later, in the teaser trailer for Pokemon Go Rocket in Pokemon Go, Giovanni says, "Earth is where I shall unleash my evil schemes next," in direct reference to his dialogue in Usum. Blue is the only gym leader to use a full team of 6 Pokemon during the player's first battle against him. We all know about Faulkner's illegal level 9 Pidgeotto, but in a demo version of Gold and Silver revealed at Nintendo Space World 1999, Faulkner's team also consisted of a level 10 Pidgeot. There's data in Pokemon Crystal for the gender of every trainer in the game, with the exception of Eusine. Bugsy is one of 2 male characters incorrectly listed as female. The other is Will. In Generation 3, a Whitney lookalike, along with Jasmine and Price lookalikes, can be seen as audience members in Pokemon contests. In For Ho-Oh, the Bells Toll, Morty calls the Bell Tower by its Generation 4 name, making him the only character to do so prior to that generation. The tower was originally named the Tin Tower in the Gen 2 games. Chuck is one of only 2 gym leaders in Heart Gold and Soul Silver whose phone number is given to the player by someone else. Chuck's wife gives you his phone number if you talk to her outside his gym, while Daisy Oak gives you Blue's number if you show her a maximum friendship Pokemon after letting her give your Pokemon massages at least 7 times. Jasmine and her Steelix named Rusty can appear as an opponent in every contest category except the Cool contest in Master Rank Super contests in the Gen 4 games and their remakes. In Gen 4, Price states that the Glacier badge will raise the special stats of Pokemon, despite badges no longer raising stats in this generation. When Claire gives the player TM24 for Dragon Breath in Gen 2, she says, "No, it has nothing to do with my breath." This was a double pun lost in translation, as Claire's Japanese name, Ibuki, can be taken to mean breath. When first fighting Roxanne in Pokemon Emerald, her team will be entirely female. However, in all subsequent rematches, her team will be all male. Flannery's and Winona's teams also have this exact change between their first match and rematches. Brawly trained with Bruno in the Sea Vault Canyon on Seven Island, according to a black belt training in said canyon. However, in the anime, it was actually mentioned that Brawly trained with Chuck, and Bruno was not mentioned. I think the only reason why they changed this detail in his backstory was because viewers might remember the much more recently debuted Chuck more than Bruno, because Brawly training with Bruno makes a little bit more sense since his home region is Kanto. Watson has been cited with 1,365 OSHA and 376 EPA violations for his work in both New Mauville and Sea Mauville. But he makes up for this because he was the one who eventually shut down the New Mauville project, costing several hundreds of workers their jobs in the process, but ultimately saving the environment. Sea Mauville closing shortly after undoubtedly caused several hundred more jobs to be lost. And though he was under investigation by Doc of the Slateport docks for being a traitor to the Devon Corporation, everyone seems to have just forgotten the extreme hardships he put them through. The worst the townsfolk ever say about him is that he's eccentric. Flannery is the only Hoenn gym leader whose team changes between Ruby and Sapphire and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. She replaces one of her 2 Slugmas with a Numel. Norman is the only protagonist father that has ever appeared in the main series Pokemon games. However, it was discovered that there were plans to include the father of the main character early in the development of Diamond and Pearl, but these plans were not discovered until their faithful remakes were data mined and the script files mentioning the father were found. Winona is one of the trainers to appear in the Pokemon World Tournament's The Battle Between Legendary Pokemon Tournament, in which every trainer uses a single legendary Pokemon. Winona uses Rayquaza. The other trainers that appear are Sabrina with Mewtwo, Faulkner with Lugia, and Fantina with Giratina. This tournament was available for download only in Japan and Korea. The gym battle against Liza and Tate in the Gen 6 games is the only one to not use the stereoscopic 3D feature, because double battles did not support it. Liza and Tate's trainer class changed between the original Gen 3 games and their remakes. During their initial appearance in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, they are referred to as singular leader, but this is corrected to the more accurate leaders in the remakes. The issue in the original games arose because of the way that trainer classes were defined in the game's code. Keeping with the theme of trainer classes, in the Delta episode when you fight Wallace, his trainer class is Suitopolitan, a reference to where he is from and not to any sort of rank. Also, as a side note in this fight, he uses the same team as his champion team in Emerald, but with slightly different levels. Juan is the only gym leader to not have a versus sprite or artwork. Such sprites were not present during battles until Gen 4, and Juan's only other appearance in the series is in Gen 5 at the Pokemon World Tournament, which also doesn't use these sprites. When Byron transitioned from being gym leader in Oreburgh to Canalave, Riley was originally considered to take over the gym in Oreburgh City. However, Riley rejected the role and insisted that Rorik take over instead. Gardenia is very afraid of ghosts, with multiple references to her fear spread throughout her dialogue in the original Gen 4 games. One interesting piece of dialogue in particular comes from when she visits the resort area's villa in Platinum. She says she worries what would happen if a Grass Ghost Pokemon existed. Grass Ghost was an unused type combination up until Gen 6. Maylene is the reason why one of the kimono girls from Johto needed to be renamed between generations 2 and 4 in Japan. Maylene's Japanese name is Sumomo, which was the same Japanese name as the kimono girl that we now know as Kuni in English. The Vaporeon trainer, since I doubt we actually recognize them by their names. This rename was especially important for the Gen 4 Johto games because Maylene makes an appearance in Heart Gold and Soul Silver at the cafe in Celadon City. There's a rumor spread throughout the Sinnoh region that Crash Your Wake is from an overseas region, despite not speaking with any sort of accent as other characters from other regions typically seem to do in these games. For example, Looker, who speaks with odd sentence construction. At the Pokemon World Tournament, one line that Crash Your Wake says confirms that he was born and raised in the Sinnoh region, despite everyone thinking he wasn't. In the Pokemon World Tournament's special tournament, the battle between legendary Pokemon that I mentioned before for One Known as Fact, I mentioned that Fantina also takes part with Giratina as her ace. However, the Giratina she uses is in Origin form, despite not holding a Gracious Orb and the battle not taking place in the Distortion world. Instead, it holds the Ghost Gem. There's an abandoned cabin on Iron Island that apparently once belonged to Byron, who says he lived on the island for many years during the mining operation's heyday. At the Battle Tower in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Candace can appear as an opponent in the Master Class Single Battles category or in the Master Class Double Battles category where she battles alongside Maylene. In singles, she can have a team which either uses a Regice or a Heatran, while in doubles, she can have an Articuno. This ties Candace with Palmer for the greatest variety of legendary Pokemon that can be used on a trainer's team in the Battle Tower. Volkner's Electivire is the only Gym Leader Pokemon in Platinum whose Pokeball uses Seals. In particular, the seal used for Electivire is Fire Seal D. Elite Four member Flint's Magmortar can also have a seal in Platinum, but only in double battles alongside Volkner. In the remakes, every Gym Leader and Elite Four's ace uses seals, so Volkner and Flint are no longer special. In Black and White 2, the Memory Link feature is used to provide context for changes that occurred in Unova in the 2-year period between Black and White and their sequels. After getting the Trio badge in Black or White and connecting the game to Black or White 2, a triple team Memory Link will be unlocked. In this flashback sequence, Chili believes that because he and his brothers did not make it to Inn's Castle in time, the Seven Sages and the Shadow Triad were able to escape. This blunder, alongside comments insinuating that none of the three are good trainers on their own, prompts a fight between the brothers. The Shadow Triad, listening in on this fight, reveal themselves and challenge the trio to a battle. And after losing terribly, Silent makes the ultimate decision for them to withdraw as gym leaders and start their training again from the ground up. In Black and White 2, once per day, players can team up with one of the triplet gym leaders for a multi-battle against the other two. All the gym leaders' teams for this battle consist of 2 level 65 Pokemon holding either a Muscle Band or a Leftovers, and a level 67 Elemental Monkey holding a Life Orb. For some reason, all 3 of the Striaton City gym leaders are named after corn in the Japanese version. Silent is named Dent after Dent Corn, Chili is named Pod after Pod Corn, and Cress is just named Corn. Just Corn. In French, they're all named after different types of nuts. Although 3 gyms were replaced between the original and sequel Gen 5 games, all of the replaced gym leaders can be battled in the sequel. However, Lenora is the only gym leader from the original Black and White games who can only be battled as part of the Pokemon World Tournament. She cannot be battled outside this facility, unlike Chili, Cress, and Silent who can all be challenged in their original gym, and Bryson who can be battled at the Pokestar Studios under a number of different personas. The difficulty modes of Black and White 2 allowed players to change the levels and composition of opponent trainers' teams. Berg is the only gym leader who switches out a Pokemon between his normal mode and challenge mode teams rather than simply adding a new one. He removes his Swadloon and adds Carablast and Shelmet instead. In the Memory Link event, taking it to the next level, Elisa tells Skyla that she wants to change how people view her, so to shake her serious appearance, she tries to take up comedy. But after a bunch of terrible puns don't land, she decides to stick to just changing her appearance instead, which explains why she had such a drastic redesign between the original and sequel games. At the end of this exchange though, Elisa makes a joke that directly comes from the 1980 comedy movie Airplane. Skyla asks her, "Surely you wouldn't mind having a Pokemon battle with me, right?" To which Elisa responds, "You bet, and don't call me Shirley."
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
In a line of dialogue shared between Lacey and Nimona in the Blueberry Academy League Club room, we learn that the two had previously met each other at a party. Lacey mentions Nimona's fancy party dress, and because we know that both Clay and Nimona's fathers are CEOs of their respective companies, this party was probably some sort of business formal event. And it was at this formal party that Nimona challenged Clay to a battle. However, while it seems like Clay had to decline because it was neither the right time nor place, we learned that Clay deeply respects Nemona for her drive and ambition. At the beginning of Skyla's Black and White 2 animated battle sprite, there's an animation error where Skyla's holster on her right leg is missing. It reappears when she pulls her left leg back down to the ground in striking her final pose. Bryson's role as the character Bryson Man at the Pokestar Studios is well known across Unova, but his fame spreads to other regions as well. In X and Y, there's an optional side task that players can take on once per day at the Hotel Riches Me in Lumiose City called the Lost and Found. In this task, players search hotel rooms for guests' missing items, and one of the items that can be found during this task is a Bryson Man action figure. Drayden and Iris are the first examples of the gym leader a player faces changing based on the version of the game being played. However, Drayden's and Iris's teams consist of the same Pokemon with just a few minor differences. All of Drayden's Pokemon are all male, while all of Iris's Pokemon are all female. And Drayden's Haxorus and Druddigon have different abilities than Iris's Haxorus and Druddigon. Drayden's Haxorus has Rivalry, while Iris's has Mold Breaker, and Drayden's Druddigon has Rough Skin, while Iris's has Sheer Force. Despite calling him Grandpa many times throughout the game, Iris and Drayden are not biologically related. If Iris truly were Drayden's granddaughter, then she would be either siblings or cousins with Drayton from the Blueberry Academy. There is a rare dialogue event from Charon that can be triggered in the original Gen 5 games. After receiving your first Pokemon and battling Bianca in your bedroom, if you were able to finish the battle without taking any damage, Charon will say, "It's amazing that you won without your Pokemons losing any energy," which is called HP. But you used some of the move's power points, or PP though, before healing your Pokemon. Bianca will always use Tackle on the first turn during this battle, which has a 100% accuracy in Gen 5. And because you don't have any healing items at this point, it is normally impossible to see this dialogue. I had to use cheats to see it for myself and get these screenshots. Roxy's base is left-handed. She presses the strings with her right hand and plays with her left, which indicates that Roxy is either left-handed or ambidextrous. In the Japanese version of Black and White 2, Marlin speaks with the Kyushu dialect, which originates from the Kyushu island of Japan, the southernmost of the 4 main islands of Japan. For more than a year following the release of Pokemon X and Y, players were not able to set their name as Viola because of the game's strict word filter, which also prohibits other Pokemon names like Cofagrigus. Viola's name was forbidden because it contains the word viol, which is the word for rape in French. This issue was fixed in a December 2014 patch. Grant is the only gym leader in the mainline games whose gym battle team consists of Pokemon all at the same level. Both his Amara and Tyrant are level 25. Every other gym leader has Pokemon of varying levels, with the exception of Tate and Liza in Ruby and Sapphire and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. However, Tate and Liza in these battles only use one Pokemon each, so they don't count. Karina is the only gym leader who uses the Gym Leader Trainer class in a battle prior to the battle against the player in their home gym. This is because Karina is the only gym leader who can be battled by the player in any game prior to the gym match. The player faces against her 2 Lucario in Geosenge Town before ever reaching Shalor City. After the gym battle, she also takes on a second title of Successor when teaching you how to use Mega Evolution. As a bonus fact, you may know that this battle can be lost and the story will still progress, but it turns out that if you don't Mega Evolve during this battle, it will automatically restart the battle until you do, regardless of whether you win or lose. And the reason I gave you that last bonus fact is because I don't have much great to say about Ramos because he does nothing important in X and Y at all, and barely has any contribution to the world around him. The best I can say for him is that he's apparently owned his pair of gardening scissors for 30 years, and that's according to the Gym Freaks TV show that the player can watch by interacting with TVs throughout the Kalos region. Clement built the hardware for the Rotom Dex of Generation 7. His role in its development was hinted at in the Dex's concept art of Sun and Moon, and by Samson Oak, who says it was partially invented by a young fellow from Kalos. This rumor was confirmed by Professor Kukui and Clement himself, though admittedly only in Pokemon Masters EX, which is not technically canon. But given all the hints they left in the mainline games, I think it's probably fair to say that this is official. We learn from a tourist in one of Kalos' many hotels that Valerie is originally from the Johto region. In the Japanese versions of X and Y, she speaks with a Kyoto dialect, much like many residents of Ecruteak City whose design was inspired by Kyoto. In Masters EX, Ethan even mistakes Valerie for a kimono girl, which is quite fitting since she also uses an evolution, Sylveon. Olympia speaks almost entirely in haiku, a style of Japanese poetry with a 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable line structure. For example, when conferring the badge, she says, "A symbol of trust," 5 syllables, level 90 or below, 7 syllables, Pokemon obey, 5 syllables. At level 59, Wulfric's Avalugg is the highest level Pokemon used by any gym leader in the mainline games prior to entering the Hall of Fame. According to his mother, Alima was an exchange student in Kalos before graduating from the trainer school on Mele Mele Island in Alola. Lana keeps all of her Pokemon in net balls in the Gen 7 games. All other trial captains exclusively use Ultra Balls. In both Sun and Moon and their Ultra counterparts, you can sleep in Kiawe's bed in Paniola Town. If you do, you'll get to read the following pleasant and not weird at all caption: "The bed looks fresh and clean, but you can still detect a faint whiff of sweat?" You can also sleep in Mallow's bed in Coney Coney City for some reason if you really wanted to, with the caption, "There's a faint smell of spices, sauces, and other fragrant things." I know the Gen 7 games are pretty famed for how much detail and strange events they have, but were these really necessary? Yeah, so this guy apparently becomes the next trial captain after Kiawe leaves Alola to learn dancing in another region. I wish I had more to say about him, but that's pretty much it. In Sun and Moon, Mallow is the one who tells us that there is an age limit to being a trial captain. Nobody over the age of 20 can hold the position. So do we really think that David is younger than 20? Sophocles is the only trial captain to not give the player a set of Pokeballs after their trial. Sophocles is also the only trial captain who ascended to their position after being chosen by the previous trial captain, his cousin Molayne, rather than the island kahuna Nanu. Molayne developed the PC storage system for the Alola region, which makes him the only PC developer to have an official Pokemon team since you're able to battle him in all the Alola titles. Acerola's father was the owner of the Melee City Library before he passed away sometime prior to the start of the Gen 7 games. With his passing, Acerola is the last of her bloodline, which just so happens to be Alolan royalty. The largest change to the trial system between the original Alola games and the Ultra versions is the addition of an 8th trial operated by Mina. Her trial is infamous for dragging the story progression down because players need to complete several battles and cutscenes involving the previous captains to collect petals for a piece of art. However, according to her parents, her original trial was simply drawing sketches of Rabambi. And honestly, I would have rather just done that instead of an hour of cutscene simulator, but whatever. According to his rare league card, Milo is able to roll hay bales around on his own with ease. As someone who grew up on a farm where we made hay bales, those things are not easy to push around at all. The quoted figure for the weight of a hay bale he can push around is 770 pounds, which is the typical weight for a medium 4-foot by 5-foot bale. Nessa's jersey number is number 49, which in Japanese sounds similar to the word meaning swim. This kind of wordplay based on homophones is called goroawase. I hope I didn't mispronounce that too badly. And the jersey number of every major trainer in Galar is its own goroawase. In addition to jersey numbers, the gym leaders in Galar are also sponsored during the gym challenge by various companies. Kabu is sponsored by Huo Guo Hop Hot, and he wears their emblem on his shorts. Bee's league card talks about how she hardly ever shows any emotion, yet the end of her rare league card reads, "So who has seen Bee smile? Her family? Her Pokemon? Or maybe someone else entirely, ... The picture on this card shows Bee appearing to be smiling at a black belt, and the wording makes it seem like she may have some sort of romantic interest. But I'm personally of the interpretation that the card is actually talking about the player who made her smile in reverence after besting her in battle. It is confirmed that Alistair owns at least 100 different copies of the mask that he is seen wearing in nearly every single one of his appearances. The only time in the games that we see him without a mask is on his rare league card. Opal's gym challenge also serves as an audition to find her replacement. In a notebook you can find after beating her gym, there are a few entries that talk about Leon and Sonia's gym challenges. It turns out that Leon only answered one of her questions correctly, while Sonia got all 3. Bede is the only trainer in the series' history whose type specialization permanently changes during gameplay. At first, he starts as a Psychic-type trainer, but then switches to Fairy-type after being recruited by Opal to be the next gym leader of Balinley. Gordy is the only gym leader that the player can face in Sword and Shield during a gym challenge who appears on more than 2 league cards: his regular card, his rare card, and Melanie's rare card. The only other trainers to appear on more than 2 cards are Bede, who also appears on 3 cards, his own and Opal's rare card, and Mustard, who again appears on 3 cards, his own and Honey's regular card. Melanie and Gordy have a strained relationship because Gordy decided to specialize in Rock-type Pokemon rather than Ice-type Pokemon. However, despite the difference in primary type usage, their teams are still more similar than they probably realize. During their gym challenges, each uses a single Monotype Pokemon of their specialty, and one of each of a Bug, Water, and Fire dual-type with their specialty. Though technically Melanie's Darmanitan only gains the Fire type after Zen mode activates below half health. Pier's battle music contains sections of remixed versions of In's final battle theme from Black and White and the Team Rocket hideout theme. Piers is also, of course, the first ever Dark-type gym leader, debuting 20 years and a few weeks after the introduction of the type. Marnie was the first rival in the main series games who could be rematched for single battles in more than one location at any given time. She can be rebattled either at the gym in Spikemouth or in tournaments at Wyndon Stadium. This set the stage for multi-location rematches against the Gen 9 rivals, who can be rebattled at both the Academy Ace tournament and the Blueberry Academy League Club Room. However, unlike the Gen 9 rivals who use the same team at either location, Marnie uses a different singles team in the Galarian Star tournament than she does in rematches at Spikemouth. Rayhan's Gigantamax animation involves his Rotom phone taking a photo of him holding his gigantic Pokeball. But the background of this photo is always in Hammerlock Stadium, even when the battle takes place somewhere else, such as tournaments in Wyndon Stadium. Clara cares a lot about appearances and personality, but always tries to take the easy way out when things get tough. She tried to become a pop star, but her album only sold 8 copies. Then she tried to become a gym leader, but gave up after only 2 days, and then ended up joining the dojo on the Isle of Armor, where she still neglects her training. This personality trait of seeking popularity and the easy way out is most apparent in her league card, where it's apparent that she used a photo filter to make herself look more attractive. See how our Slowbro is distorted in this picture? Avery and Clara go on to become minor league Psychic and Poison type gym leaders after the events on the Isle of Armor. The existence of the minor leagues further emphasizes the gym challenge as a type of sporting event in the Galar region, like how baseball has both major and minor leagues. Mustard was a fighting type gym leader and then Galar champion before retiring to his dojo on the Isle of Armor. After completing the storyline on the Isle, Mustard can be rematched, but in order to do so, you must disturb him from his game of Pokemon Quest, which is a real-life spin-off game for phones in the Nintendo Switch that came out in 2018 that I had personally never heard of until making this video. Peony is the only trainer in all the mainline series games who has held the title of Region Champion and cannot be battled by the player while having a team of 6 Pokemon. The most Pokemon Peony uses against the player at any given time is 5, during rematches at the max lair in the Crown Tundra. In the Blueberry Academy, you can invite important trainers like gym leaders to the League Club Room to chat, battle, and even trade Pokemon. If Katie is brought to the League Club Room, she will trade you a female Combee in exchange for almost any Pokemon of your choice. Because traded Pokemon show their original trainer's ID, this Combee shows us that her ID is 993663. This means that Katie has the highest trainer ID number of any trainer in the mainline games whose ID is known. Many of Brassius's artworks are scattered around and about Artizone, but there are specific artworks in particular which are a reference to previous games. In the Lily Cove Museum in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, there is an artist who will sell you base decorations called the Meditative Seat, Heterarchial Loop, and Paradoxical Popper, which are the exact same as these 3 pieces in Artizone listed as created by an unknown artist. Though, next to the Paradoxical Popper, an NPC hints that this piece must be a Brassius original, but the style is off. From Brassius's lore that we learn about through the art classes at the Academy, Brassius had a period where he made what he considered to be artistic trash because he was only after money and fame, just like the artist in Lily Cove City who was trying to sell his art to the museum. It is entirely plausible that Brassius did not claim credit for these works because he didn't approve of them, which would mean that the artist that we met in Lily Cove City in Oraz is Brassius. Or perhaps the NPC is wrong about who made the art and Brassius didn't properly give credit to the true creator when putting them on display, which doesn't seem likely. In the Blueberry Academy, Iono is the only Paldean gym leader who will trade the player a Pokemon whose line she never uses in any of her battles. She trades the player a Magnemite, in reference to her hair clips. The only other special coaches in the Blueberry Academy who trade Pokemon that they are never seen using in battle are Nemona and Clavel, who trade a Paldean Tauros and Palmo, respectively. However, in these two cases, we see them using these Pokemon in the intro sequence of the games. Katie was one of Kofu's students before she became the Cortando gym leader. Kofu taught her both how to bake and how to battle. During the champion assessment in Scarlet and Violet, Larry's Altaria doesn't know any flying-type moves. This Altaria is the only Pokemon during the whole assessment which does not know a move matching the type of its trainer's specialty. On one of the bookshelves in the Academy in Scarlet and Violet, you can find a magazine called The Musician's Register, which says that when Rhyme was a teenager, her puppy Pokemon died, but her song brought it back to this world as a ghost Pokemon. It's unclear if this is any one of the ghost dog Pokemon that she uses in her battles. Time is the only NPC in any mainline Pokemon game to use a dusk form Lycanroc during battle, but she only does so in battles at the Blueberry Academy. Remember that funny pose that you and Kofu pulled in the picture after getting his gym badge? Well, it turns out that Tulip was the one who came up with the idea for it, according to dialogue shared between Kofu and Tulip in the League Club Room. Grusha and Clavel share a trainer ID, 209896, as evidenced by the summary screens of the Pokemon they trade to the player in the Blueberry Academy. Seems like a case of someone forgetting to change a data entry field.